and the Pathfinder story, and they're both got a lot of good stuff in it. So, let's take a look. When did Pathfinder start? And I like to think that Pathfinder started back in 1879. That is when a couple young people was walking down a road. One of them was 14 years old and one was 17 years old. And they were they were concerned about their fellow young people that they associated with. They had a burden for them. So as they walked down the road, they climbed over a fence and had prayer. Well, from that, Pathfinder started, well, I shouldn't say Pathfinder started, but something to do with junior youth. There was a lot of schools and churches that experimented with doing something for their youth from 1879 to 1907. And you know, before we get any further, I forgot to pass out some of these. And you may want to fill this out as we go along. Some of it we'll cover, and then at the end, hopefully, we'll give you the answers, and so you can fill in some of those that might be blank. You'll see right up the top there how important Pathfinders is to you. And we're going to cover a little bit of that, about how important Pathfinders are for a church. Make sure you don't give the key out, the answer sheet. Okay, thank you. In 1907 is when the youth department was established, 1907. And in 1909, the JMV. Some of you older people might remember the JMV. And then that was Junior Missionary Volunteers. And I can remember that. Then in 1919, there was a guy by the name of Arthur Spaling, thank you, that organized what they called the Mission Scouts. He wrote up a pledge and law, and the pledge and law was kind of the foundation of what we have now. That was interesting to me as I studied in this. 1922 is when the Friend, Companion, classes were started, and along with that was Comrade and Master Comrade. Any of you remember the Comrades classwork? Probably not, because when World War II came around, they changed all that to Guide and Master Guide. So probably nobody here, including myself, was before World War II. Anyway, in 1928 was the first honors that came about. They were called merits. And there were 16 of them they started out with. And it was interesting to me that one of them was shoe repair. And I don't know if that's even available anymore. I don't know. I don't remember ever running across that, but that was one of them. In 1929, there was changed to vocational honors, and by then they'd had 35 of them. And now it was interesting to me that in 1929, there was a person that decided that they had a burden to do something for the young fellows in their church. And, well, they'd get ready, the daughters would help him get ready for the Pathfinder, I'm going to call it Pathfinder, I'm not sure what they called it, club. And then the daughter would start complaining because she'd have to leave. So shortly after that, they were able to do something for the girls. The church board of that church told them that they were going to have to do away with, quit doing the club meetings, or there would be some church discipline. And they did things pretty much like we do now. So that was interesting as I was looking into some of the past in the history of pathfindering. 1946. Anybody want to take a guess that happened in 1946? A guy by the name of John Hancock was the youth director in one of the California conferences, and they started experimenting with Pathfinder clubs down there. And they did a lot well, they got into several clubs down there. John Hancock had majored in art in college, and he did the Pathfinder triangle patch that we know we wear on our sleeve. And there were several things that that patch means. I think you all recognize this. I just got back from a trip down to Louisiana. I have a son that lives down there. And I saw a lot of the signs along the road. It reminded me of this. They said yield. And but let's take a look here. I don't know if it's on your sheet there, but if you need to, there's some blank spots on the back of it there, and you might want to write this stuff down. I need to find the... Okay, all this stuff means something, and I'm going to Okay, there's three sides to this. The three sides means the physical, social, and spiritual. So you might want to write that down. I'll try to go slow enough if you want to do that. The red anybody want to take a guess what the red means? Sacrifice of Jesus. The white stands for purity and righteousness of Christ. Anybody want to take a guess of what the sword represents? Okay. You all hear that? I'm sorry? Okay. The white stands for purity and righteousness of Christ. The red, the sacrifice that Jesus made for our salvation. The blue stands for loyalty. Now let's take a look at the Pathfinder flag. You're probably all acquainted. There's blue and white over there. Let's take a look at that. The blue is courage and loyalty, and the white for purity. Okay, you got all that? Like I mentioned, in 1946, they started working with clubs down there in California, And keep in mind that this was not yet okayed by the General Conference, but they was kind of working at a trial run to see how things would go. There was a person by the name of, in fact, he was a pastor of Harry Byrd, that in 1948 he designed what we have as the Pathfinder Club, and he also wrote in 1949 the Pathfinder song. Harry Byrd, he was not a musical person, and somebody told him that he ought to write a song for Pathfinders. And so he was on a speaking engagement, and as he drove along, in fact, what I've seen, I think, is the 49 Chevy. And as he drove along, he was thinking about that and wrote in his mind, he was going over a poem. So finally he stopped and wrote this poem out, and we have the Pathfinder song. And music was put on with it. What's that?
Is his name B-I-R-D or B-U-R-G?
It's B-E-R-G-H. Okay, Pathfinders went through in 1949 the General Conference. In 1950, it became as we know now, a worldwide Pathfinder club. Now, I personally have been in different places in the world. I was in a Pathfinder Sabbath down in Brazil. I couldn't tell you what they said, but I knew it was Pathfinder Sabbath. And I happened to be in the jungles of Borneo one day, and there was somebody wearing a shirt that had a Pathfinder emblem on it. And I told him, I said, I got to have one of those. And he got me one. I just ran across it the other day, actually. Well, it wasn't just the other day. It was because we've been gone for a month, but it was just a little before we left. 1952, we had the treat instead of the trick. And that came out of Wisconsin. 1952. What do I mean by that? Who said that? You did? You're not acquainted with that?
Oh, I know about can collecting.
Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. You've had it. Okay. The first Pathfinder Fair, 1951. The first Camporee, 1953. And it was interesting at that Camporee, they had cold weather. Like so many of us have had. It was a cold weekend. 1959 was the first Union Camporee. Now I'm going to tell a little bit about my age. I was there. And if you have the privilege to go through the Pathfinder Museum, and where it talks about that first Union Camporee, the pennant that is up there was one that I used to have. It's the one that, if you look real close, there'll be thumbtacks holes where it used to hang on my bedroom wall. It was held out of Yakima. Anybody here from Yakima or that area? It was up toward White Pass from Yakima, just below the dam there at the lake. And okay, how did you do? Got them all filled in?
51 was
The first fair. I've heard that you can't go anywhere in the world where you can't find Pathfinders or Coca-Cola. Hopefully not together. Okay, let's take a look here. How important Pathfinders to you? 1 to 10. Who put 10? Who put 1? Who put 9? 8? Pathfinders is very important to me. As I've gotten older, I came from I would say, a very good family. But between church school and Pathfinders, those two played a very important part in my life. And as we'll get into a little later, you're going to see where it became very important to others' lives. How does Pathfinders relate to the church board, and adventures? Well, let's take adventures first. How does Pathfinders play with adventures? What's that?
Feeder stock for Pathfinders.
Okay. I've never heard that term, but that's you got it right. Yeah, hopefully you have not only adventures, but you also have Pathfinders where they can go from adventures into Pathfinders. How many of you have the adventure club with Pathfinders? How do you go from the adventures when they get old enough to go in Pathfinders? Do you have a little ceremony? No? What about, I saw a hand back there or two. You have a ceremony or anything where you...
We just started both of them last year, so we haven't done that yet.
I have even seen where they have little, these, what do you call, mortar hats, where they graduate from adventures and go into Pathfinders. I've also heard, I don't know if I've ever seen it, where they have a bridge where they can cross over. But yeah, it's really good. Okay, how did you do on the blanks here? 1950, Pathfinders became a worldwide. MV started in 07, JMV in 09. Lawrence Skinner was the first Pathfinder director, and he served for 13 years. John Hancock. I knew him when I was in Pathfinders. He was the North Pacific Union Pathfinder director, and he was from 1954 to 63, just about 10 years. I saw him at, I think it was Camp Hale, and I said something to him, "You remember me?" And he said, "Yeah, you're one of my boys." Well, that was a pretty universal answer. And Leo Ranslin would be the next one. He followed John Hancock. John Hancock, I think we got time. Yes. John Hancock played an accordion. You remember that? You remember him playing Onward Christian Soldiers? Boy, he could make that thing talk. Well, we were going, Wayne Hicks, myself, and a person from the educational department from the conference was going to a memorial service. And the educational man used to be in Montana, and he shared this story about John Hancock and himself. John came in on the train, and he went on the train to help John get things off, his accordion, suitcase, and so forth. And while they were on the train started moving. And they got a hold of the conductor and, "Well, sorry, we can't stop the train." So they get to the next stop, they get off, And this educational man called his wife, and she came and got him. They went back to where the car was parked, where he was supposed to get off at, and it was in the wintertime, and the educational man had kept the car running, and it was still sitting there running. So Montana must be a very, very honest place to live. Anyway, okay, let's see here.
It was Leo. What was Leo's last name?
Ranslin? Oh boy, Rauzalin. Okay, you got it. He's a Brazilian, if I remember correctly. In fact, I'm sure of that. Okay, the next one would be the first North American Division Camporee was held in 1985 at Camp Hale in Leadville, Colorado. How many? There's got to be somebody here that was there. You were probably a Pathfinder then. I was there, but I wasn't a Pathfinder. I was an older Pathfinder. Camp Hale in Leadville, Colorado. Progressive classwork was introduced in 1922. Friend, companion, comrade, and master comrade. And you notice the progressive classwork. You had to have friend before you could get companion. You had to have companion before you could get the next one, and then so forth and so on. And occasionally I still hear that progressive classwork term. And that tells me which date they come out of. Okay, the name Pathfinders were first used at a summer camp in 1929. The first conference-sponsored Pathfinder Club was held in California in 1946. The Pathfinder emblem was designed by John Hancock in 1946. And the three-sided emblem represents, does anybody want to help me? Mental, physical, spiritual. The shield represents what? I don't think we covered that. Okay. What does it? It protection of God's word. The color red represents what? Sacrifice of Jesus made for our salvation. The white stands for purity and the righteousness of Christ. Blue stands for loyalty. The gold represents what? Excellence. As Pathfinders aim to reach the highest standard of character. In 1948, Helen Hobbs made the Pathfinder flag. And in 1949, I think we had a misprint there. Harry Bird wrote the Pathfinder song. On the backside, the first Pathfinder fair happened what year? 1951. My dad had a 51 Ford pickup at one time. In California, 2 years later, the first conference camporee. 1957, the JMV Pathfinder Day was added to the calendar. The first Union camporee was held in 1959, and that's just below Rimrock Lake It was just below Rimrock Lake. In fact, I got to tell you something that happened that was kind of interesting. There's a river that runs out of that lake and runs down, I guess it goes through Yakima. I'm not sure where it goes. And people were putting stuff in there to keep cool. That was their refrigeration. Well, somebody up at the dam decided to let more water out. So I don't know what happened to the food, if they went after it or what happened, but it floated away, a lot of it anyway.
Just out of curiosity, how many, have any idea what size, number of kids or staff, whatever, was in 1951 in that?
You know, I think I remember something about that. I have to look it up. Let me see here, page 50. And we're just covering a little bit of, there's so much more history that, let's see.
No worries, I was just curious, like it was
Yeah,
200 or 50 or what it was.
I don't have a figure on the fair, but in the camporee there was 55.
At the Union Camper, it was only 55?
Yeah, no, this was the first camporee. There was 55.
The one in 1959?
59, I don't have any number on that.
The first camper was only 55.
In 62, the MV Pathfinder Field Guide was published. You must have one of those. I should have brought mine. Pardon? Yeah, we have. You can get it from ABC, I imagine. Or
The original one was kind of a sage green color. If I
okay. Advent Source may have it. You can talk to the person here. I'm not sure. I've had mine so many years I couldn't even remember where I got it. The first division in the North Europe, West Africa was held in Sweden, 1971. I'm not sure why that's even in there. Probably that is the history that we're not connected with, but it's there. In 1979, the MV was changed to AY. There's probably some of us that remember that, and JMV was changed to AJY. 2010 marked the 60th year of anniversary of Pathfinder. Okay. Now we're going to move into how important Pathfinders are and how it affects the church. Like I mentioned, Pathfinders played a very important part in my life. I had my main director, when I say my main director, the one that probably had the most years, was quite an outdoor person, a guy by the name of Horace Gates. Does anybody here, does that name ring a bell? He was a teacher. I actually had him for a teacher 2 years over in the Washington Conference. And somehow or another, he discovered 20 acres for back taxes. And if I remember right, we bought that. Now remember, this was in the 50s. The figure that I'm going to throw out there isn't much now, but it was a lot more then. If I remember right, we bought it for $50, which was, but you got to keep in mind, my folks, about the same time, just before that, bought a half acre for $150. So kind of give you an idea. just before that, my folks bought a brand new Ford pickup, half-ton, around $1,500. So that kind of gives you an idea. $50 was worth a whole lot more than it is now. Anyway, it was really a good place for Pathfinders. And as far as I know, they still own the property there. They have since logged it, which I'm sure they got a lot more money than we bought it for. But there was a fellow in one of the churches, if I remember right, we were a 2-district club. There was a fellow in one of the districts that had a sawmill, and I remember slabs coming out from his sawmill and dumped off up above. It was on a hillside, and it kind of went down, kind of like this. And down in this little valley part, there was a swamp, and we hauled slabs and whatever else that got dropped off there. You know, with slabs might come partially some lumber and whatnot. But anyway, we hauled down there, and there was 3 cabins built. One of them was enclosed, and the other 2 were 3-sided, and they had bunks in them. He was quite an outdoor man, and really affected my life for a benefit. Now, let me carry it a little further, and I'm not tooting my horn, but I've been head elder, an elder, deacon, taught Sabbath school class. So that was a good connection with the church, just growing up. Back then, they called us junior counselors. When we got too old for Pathfinders, then we were junior counselors. And now I guess they call them TLTs. And anyway, it's a sobering thought. Now listen to this. It's a sobering thought that 19 out of 20 people who become Christians do so before the age of 25. After 25, only 1 in 10,000 become Christians. After 45, only 1 in 50,000. After 65, only 1 in 500,000. The peak age for baptisms in the Seventh-day Adventist Church is 12. The next age is 13. What ages is Pathfinders? How much? 10 through 15? Those of you that are connected in Pathfinders, you're right on the front lines. You're right on the front lines. I have a letter here from one of my old Pathfinders. She sent, in fact, I hate to say this, but she's a grandmother, the last I knew. Anyway, she sent us a letter. She was one of my, what I would call one of my better Pathfinders. I got to see if I can find it here. Can't believe, this is just part of this letter. Can't believe you're still doing your time with Pathfinders. The kids are lucky. And remember, I'm not pointing to me. I mean, it's just, this is one of my paychecks. The kids are lucky. You are the best, John. Then she put in parentheses, Mr. Wenger, because I required that they called on staff by last name. And it was extra special that you got married while we were a Pathfinder. There in Chehalis. That was Chehalis on the other side. I'll never forget the old saying, it makes your ears grow longer, especially when it comes to eating burnt egg shells. the time spent at the outposts will never be forgotten. Marching, goofing off with Henry, he was one of the staff, teasing him unmercifully. Pretty soon my grandkids will be in Pathfinders here, and I can't imagine having more fun and more respect for our leaders than with you two. Just talking about myself and my wife. Thanks for bringing those days, making those days memorable for me, and I'm sure all the rest of our group. Like I said, this is one of the paychecks. Some of you here probably was praying for me this last January. I was in the hospital. I just found out not too long ago, there was 2 days, my youngest son was telling me this. He said there was 2 days. We didn't know if you were going to make it or not. I didn't know that. I wanted to go home. I didn't have time to be there. Anyway, I ended up in rehab. I had to kind of learn to walk again, doctor. They keep you in those beds too long. Anyway, a young person came to the door, actually, to where my room. He was in one of the rehab people, therapists, you got it. He had seen my name. He wasn't one of my therapists, but he saw my name, and he came by, and he said, I was in Pathfinders, and he named where he was at. Okay, another paycheck's coming up. If I tear up, you'll understand. He said, because of you, I'm keeping the faith. It's not me. It's all of us working together. Here's a picture of a Pathfinder that I was the area coordinator and head coordinator part of the time when I knew her. She gave this to me. I'm keeping her picture low so you don't know who it is. Dear John, thank you for being such a positive influence in my life. I can recall many lessons that you have taught me during my Pathfinder years. Here I am about ready to graduate from high school. I'm not 100% positive of what God has in store for my future, but I do know this. I do know that when He calls the moves, that my life will go on in the most fantastic direction. God bless. Well, since this, she's been taking nursing at our college in Tennessee. Is she an asset to the church? You bet she is. Here's another paycheck. I had so much fun as a child in Pathfinders, just lost touch, I guess. Still memories are fond, and I have many. From someone that doesn't keep the faith, but had a positive time in Pathfinders, and hopefully because of that, they will come back. Our mission, the salvation of His kids. Our vision, see all kids in heaven by teaching practical skills as tools for successful living in Christ. I've got to go get ready for dismissing you for supper. If you didn't sign up the duty list, you better go do it, because I'm not letting anybody go until we've got the people we need. Thank you. We'll see you at supper.